All right, I'm going to read it out for everyone. Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. It is true that some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, while others out of goodwill. The latter do so out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I am in chains. But what does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is preached, and because of this I rejoice. Yes, I will continue to rejoice, for I know that through your prayers and God's provision of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, what has happened to me will turn out for my deliverance. I eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage, so that now, as always, Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. If I am to go on living in the body, this will mean fruitful labor for me, yet what shall I choose? I do not know. I am torn between the two. I desire to depart and be with Christ, for which is better by far, but is more necessary for me that I remain in this body. Convinced of this, I know that I will remain and I will continue with all of you for your progress in joining the faith, so that through my being with you again, your boasting in Jesus Christ will abound on account of me. Okay. So there's definitely a lot in that passage. There's a lot to unpack and there's a lot to go through, but as I'm going through this, I kind of want to focus on one particular thing, and that is kind of what are we living for? What does our life mean? What gives our life meaning? And how we each have things in our lives that we all think give our life meaning and that all that matters to us, but what truly matters? And to give us context is Paul is currently in jail. Paul is currently within chains. Literally, he is escorted by a Roman guard every minute of every day. He's not allowed to leave anywhere without by the side of a Roman guard. He's literally chained to a Roman guard. Bathroom, everything. And so we look at Paul, and Paul is the best of the best. Paul is the top tier. Paul is the top dog in the early church. Like, he is the architect of the early church. Like, he wrote majority of the New Testament. Like, Paul could walk into any major city, debate a couple of people, share the gospel, and there would be so many people converted that there would be enough to start a church. So Paul is, totally administering to others. He's sharing the gospel. He's doing all these great stuff, and yet here we see Paul is stuck in a jail, chained. And this kind of shows us a reality, a problem that a lot of us Christians face that not a lot of other people face. That a problem not necessarily a problem, but a difficulty for us to endure. And that is, we kind of see God sometimes works against his own will from our point of view. I mean, look at Paul. Paul's ministering to all these people. He's sharing the gospel to all these people, and yet God decides to put him in chains. Like, what is God thinking? Putting Paul in chains is the top guy, the guy who's going to be remembered for history by us and by all these people, has all this knowledge, all this wisdom, and all this influence on all these people, and God decides to put him in chains. And not only that, but Paul's response to this is total positivity. No negativity. He's entirely positive. Because Paul doesn't care about the fame. Paul doesn't care about all the prestige and all this stuff. He's very eager to see what God's going to do in his life. And that's how we need to be for us. Is that Paul is sitting here in these chains and he's looking at God and he's like, okay, God, what are you going to do next? From our perspective, we have such a limited perspective, and yet God can see everything that we can see. Take a preacher who has this amazing preaching ability, and yet by his early 30s, he dies from cancer or whatever. Like, to us, that doesn't make any sense, but we don't know what God can pull out of that. There's this guy named Lee Price, I believe. I might be butchering that name, but he says that in this commentary of Philippians 1:12-26, he says that God is the only alchemist. And in the medieval times, alchemy was this ability to basically try and turn lead into gold. Lead was this worthless, kind of valueless substance, and then turning it into gold, which was this extremely valuable substance to everyone. And it shows that God can take the lead and turn it into gold. God can take our hard positions and our hard struggles and walking us through the darkness, and he can turn it into gold. And that's how Paul's response is. Paul's response is, God, I don't know, I don't see the full picture, but I'm very eager to see what you do next. I'm very eager to see what you're going to take out of this, what gold you're going to take out of this, and how you can transform this. And he's not looking at it, from that perspective. I mean, from my perspective, if you ask me, God, just having Paul administer to these few Roman guards, rather than the multitude of Christians that he could be producing in all these other nations, to me, that doesn't make any sense. To me, the cost-benefit analysis of these two situations doesn't make sense to me. But God knows far more than I do because I'm limited and I can't see the full picture. And Paul realizes that, and we need to realize that when we go through hard times, that we can't see the full picture. But we need to be eagerly waiting in all of our hard times, when we endure them, to be eagerly ready to see what God's going to do next. What gold is he going to produce? And there's so many things that we do, and I also want to focus on Paul's positivity rather than negativity. Because like I said, Paul's the best of the best, and if you look at us, like me personally, when I go through struggle, that's not total positivity. I'm like, hey God, what are you going to do next? I'm usually yelling at God. I'm usually really, really angry at God. Like I can use so many other things. I usually get mad at God. I'm usually, if I'm being honest, I'm probably sad that God's taking whatever this is away from me. Because I don't idolize Jesus. I don't prioritize Jesus at the number one spot. There's some of us that prioritize pleasure and fun, or hanging out with friends. That everything we do is for that pleasure and for that fun. Everything we do. Whenever we work, our work doesn't really mean anything to us because the work is just there just to get us the money so we can spend it on our friends and on our pleasure and all of our fun. There's also people who are really stoic, and they think that being life and the meaning of life is being able to endure through everything and go through all the struggle and without a phase on your face. Everything. But clearly that's not possible. A lot of us look at, me personally, I look at life as career-wise. What am I going to do in my career? I want to be really, really, really successful. I'm willing to put in that work. But the moment that I lose that, what do I become? I mean, take an athlete who wants to go to the Olympics. He sacrifices everything. He sacrifices his family. He sacrifices his career. He sacrifices his time. Everything for those Olympics. But what happens when God doesn't give that to him? What is he when he's in his chains, metaphorically or symbolically, for not getting into the Olympics? Who is he then? Is he looking at, hey, God, what are you going to do now? No, he's yelling out and lashing out at God. And that Paul perfectly sees here that his life is not dependent on being the best, being the architect of the early church. It's about being with God. Because of that, he has this mindset of, I can't wait to be with God. That's my relationship. We should be prioritizing our relationships. If you ask me, I'm a really young guy, so I have a lot of, we all are really young, so we have a lot of years ahead of us. So if God were to kill you right now, would you be eager to go to heaven? Would you be happy with that result? If you ask me, I'm not. I want to live my life. I want to have a family. I want to achieve this, this, and this. But Paul has this really authentic relationship with Christ in that he doesn't care about the life. He doesn't care about, becoming really successful, really rich, achieving this in life, having these amount of friends in your life, having all this. He just wants to be with God. He just wants to be with Jesus. And because of that mindset, because of that authentic relationship with Christ, he can go through anything. He can endure through everything. He can go through all the suffering, all that he's going through. He can be in chains, and he's like, as long as I'm with God, as long as I'm with Jesus, I'm all good. And that's how I need to be. That's how we all need to be. I need to be so locked into my relationship with Christ that I could care less what happens in this life. As much as I want to, as much as I want to be successful, as much as I want to have this, this, and this in my life, at the end of the day, I need to be prioritizing my relationship with Christ. I need to have an authentic relationship with Christ where I can go through anything, all the darkness, and I can just say, God, I'm eager for what you're going to do next. And I have the trust that God's going to keep me alive. And I have the trust that God's going to wake me up tomorrow morning and keep me being productive and help me spreading the word of Christ, just as Paul was. Paul was like, I want to be with Christ, but I know that I still have a lot to do here on this earth. I still have a lot to do and to help administer to others. So just because, we may face struggles, because we will face struggles and we will face obstacles, that doesn't mean that we stop. That doesn't mean that we, stop going and trying to do all these things. God loves us. God wants us to do well. God's a father. Look at our parents. Our parents care so much about what we want. They want us to have the best, and that's how God is. And so you have to realize, and this is something that I've learned, that God is on my side. God's not out here to get me. God's not out here up in heaven just throwing these things at me and says like, oh, I can't wait to see how he reacts here and laughing to all of his angels. God doesn't hate me. God's doing everything for a reason. God's not putting me through suffering just randomly because I was doing too well at one point, but he's putting it to me through a reason. And that goes down, and suffering is a whole different subject that I won't go through, and I'll stick with just making sure that your life is prioritized with God. And this is one thing that I've realized a lot, especially this week, is that When I want to be successful, that's something that I constantly have to be putting in check. We will always have an idol on the shelf. We will always be worshiping something. And more often than not, my idol of being successful and wanting this in my life is up there on the shelf and not God. And the moment that I put God up on there, I feel all good. I'm like, hey, I got God on my shelf. I'm doing all good. But the moment I look away for a second, my idol's back up on there. And so I have to we all have to be constantly reevaluating our lives tirelessly. Constantly evaluating our lives, making sure that our life priority is Jesus and our relationship with God. And that's a struggle. And that's the hard thing about being a Christian. But at the end of the day, that's the best thing for us. Putting God on that shelf is the best thing we have. That's all I have for all of us.